G'day and welcome back to Critical AFL on YouTube. After a bit of an underwhelming result to end our 3-week stint of games in WA, that came with a few big positives as well as some bigger negatives. The positive news was that on an individual level, some of our emerging players put in their best performances all year, while the negative news came in the form of injuries and the scoreboard. Overall, for tonight's review, though, I'll be covering a brief overview of how I saw the match tonight, who our best players were, including some promising performances, my key takeaways from the match, and then finally, my predictions for what the side will look like coming out of the bye. So, to kick us off, I guess it's worth just addressing the elephant in the room. We didn't start well. If you take a slow, deep breath and then breathe out that frustration that we're all feeling, you'll actually see that when that quarter time siren blew, we were 6 goals, 3 down, and actually beat Carlton over the next 3 quarters, ultimately losing by 34 points or 5 goals, 4. My immediate thought at quarter time was a nagging concern I had going into the game that there might have been a virus running through the squad. It always worries me when I see a player pulled late in the week with illness, which was Hoff. And then watching the waffle yesterday, I'm not sure if anyone noticed from my review of that game, but most of our better players weren't the AFL listed guys in the squad. And I do know that the AFL listed guys do spend more time training together. But that did push that little worry of mine even harder going into our game against Carlton tonight. It's kind of good to say that it doesn't look like in the end that was the case, just because we ran the game out. And I just think that Carlton handled that wet weather better than we did, especially early. Their pressure really stifled our ball movement all night. And you could just tell that all of our little skill errors with a wet ball was never going to allow us to ease that pressure up that they put on us. The uncontested possession count was probably the biggest differential out of anything for the night, which I think does highlight that difference in pressure between the two sides. I know that Fox Footy do show the pressure gauge from time to time during matches in their broadcast, but I've never been able to find it on the AFL Stats website. So if anyone knows if that stat's available anywhere, I'd love to know because it's never really anything that I can seek. It's just if opportunistically you see it when they're talking about it, you'll get a rough idea, but it just looked like their pressure was way higher than ours for most of the night. Anyway, that was my take on the loss. The only other thought I had was that I actually do think we could have had a bit of a closer margin at the end of the night, but that could just be biased because I'm focusing on our missed opportunities and I don't want to admit that Carlton missed a few at their end too, which I know that they did. So I'd be keen to hear how everyone else feels about the margin and whether it should have been closer or should have been further, because that opinion's definitely not a hill that I'm prepared to die on. It's just a thought that I had with all our misses. That said, let's get into the most positive part of tonight, which was our best players. And number one for me was our mid-season draftee, Tom McCarthy. In his AFL debut, he actually became the first Eagle all year to collect more than 30 disposals, finishing with 31 disposals before crossing the interchange line, looking absolutely wrecked with about 3 minutes to go. Like I mentioned in his waffle debut 2 weeks ago, his composure with the ball in hands is elite. And I think I can't think of a single mistake he made all night, actually, with every one of those disposals. He distributed out a defensive 50 accurately. He found blokes even under maximum pressure right at the top of that defensive goal square. And he has a lot of dash in him too. I know it's a big call to be saying this, but I think we've picked up a long-term A-grader at the mid-season draft this year. And he looks like he's going to have so much more room for physical improvement over the preseason too. That's just on appearance and just the end of a big game, the way he came off. So there's still a lot left there after just one game. He looked very good. Second best for me was Harley Reid, who played his best game all year and probably could have been our best player if he managed to convert two of those goal opportunities that almost happened. He finished with 28 disposals, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's his highest possession count so far in his career. The number 27 sticks out in my mind at least once or twice last year, but never more than that. Like I said, though, it was his best game this year because there were a lot more fend-offs and line-breaking dashes that he made last year by comparison, which I think might just be a bit of fitness that he lost over this preseason with some injury. Either way, his match fitness looks like it's gotten progressively better every week for the last month now. Possibly all season's a better way of putting it, but he's also looked like he's been happier out there too, which I know is a narrative that's been doing the rounds lately, but it does look like that's the case. Number three, our next best player for me was Tyrell Dewar. And before anyone says it, I know it looks like I'm just going down the possessions list in order from tonight, but it was actually his meters gained that really did it for me. He finished the night with 843 meters gained, which is absolutely massive. And I think the most important thing was how many times I saw him just get a few steps ahead of that pressure zone that Carlton strangled us with all night. So it was actually how important what he did for us tonight was just based on the dynamic of the game. I will admit that whenever I see him running along the boundary line under pressure, I feel tense, worrying that he'll kick it out on the full. What I've noticed is that if somebody's right in his hammer, he struggles not to kick the ball in the exact direction that he's running in. I'm not sure if it's as simple as just overcorrecting and deliberately trying to bring that ball more inboard. But either way, his impact on a night where we struggled to break a defensive line was massive. Bailey Williams also had a really big game in front of goal, and I think he's quite possibly cemented his spot in the side for the rest of the year on tonight. I just don't think how you can look past a guy who's hitting the goals as well as he is. He finished with 3 goals, 1 for the night, but just looked so reliable whenever he lined up. And just as importantly, he created his opportunities with key forward craft, taking marks that I don't think many other guys would have been guaranteed to take. And I know that sounds like a bit of a weird metric, but there's a difference between just being in the right place at the right time versus earning them as a pure key forward. I think I've taken digs at both Tom Lynch and Jeremy Cameron this year against us for losing their one-on-one contests to, I think it was Sandy Brock on Lynch and Ruben Jinby on Jeremy Cameron, respectively, even though both of those guys finished with multiple goals. And that was just because of the nature of the way they got their goals. So it's just trying to put perspective on that statement about Bailey Williams. Ironically, I also think that Bailey Williams may have cemented Matt Flynn's position in the squad as well, just purely by putting pressure on the selection committee to keep him in the forward line and avoid spending such an important goal kicker in the ruck all night. So while he can do both, it's probably a good dilemma for us to have. Say otherwise if you don't agree. Outside of those really impressive performances, all from guys that I consider to be emerging players, even Bailey Williams now because he's proving himself more as a forward, and I know we've never given him that opportunity just with our ruck issues over the years. There were still a bunch of guys who were very good outside of them. I thought Ruben Jinby and Jack Graham were both really strong all night, both guys who I'd describe as known quantities for us at this point, but Elijah Hewitt continues to have an impressive year with 17 disposals and a goal, while my promising performance goes to Beau Allen, who finished with 14 and was really accountable all night, and also showed what a power athlete that he is, just with multiple line-breaking charges through congestion for the night. So while as a team, I think our natural game style under Andrew McWalter suffered a bit in the wet, the individual performances were really exciting, which is my first key takeaway from the loss. Like I mentioned, most of our best performances came from emerging players, while the list of guys who didn't play well is actually probably smaller than you think. Just pull up the stats and just tell me, well, don't tell me who you think sucked if it's not really what I'm inviting, but just if you thought that there was a large number of guys who didn't pull their weight tonight, because I didn't think it was a big list. There's a strong argument that our mid-season draftee, Tom McCarthy, was our best player, which is what I pushed earlier. And even better than that, he was our first West Coast Eagles to crack 30 disposals for the year, which a lot of you probably know has been a talking point of concern for me this year. Harley Reid played his best game, like I said, as did Tyrell Dewar. Beau Allen looked like he's landed himself in the AFL side after spending the first half of the season in the waffle or as the sub. And speaking of the sub, I also think that my latest personal favourite, Clay Hall, did enough to be asking for full 4 quarters in the side. If not next week, then the one afterwards. Although it really wouldn't surprise me if he's kept inside the sub for the next couple of weeks. We do seem to have a weird trend of giving guys a couple of weeks as the sub before a full game. Doesn't really make much sense to me, but I have noticed it with both Tom Gross and Beau Allen before Clay Hall. But either way, that was my full takeaway, is that the individuals in the side are looking really good. So don't get too concerned by the loss. I know it's a wet weather sport, but I think the wet weather really hurt us tonight. Secondly, unfortunately, my second key takeaway is almost as negative as the first one is positive, and that is that we could be in big trouble with injuries coming out of tonight. As the sirens sounded, it looked like Oscar Allen, Jaden Hunt, and Harry Edwards all have question marks next to their name. And out of those 3, Allen and Edwards both take big bites out of our depth, with Jake Waterman and Jeremy McGovern already out for the season. And also, importantly, the Oscar Allen injury could have huge implications for us if it's serious in lots of different ways. I don't want to get too deep into it, but obviously there's been the talk about the move to Brisbane and the band one compensation. So even that could be in jeopardy if it's potentially serious injury. So just for his sake, I do hope it's a good one, but there's a lot of other things that weigh on that as well. Which does take me to my predictions for next round after the bye. Normally, I do this segment in my waffle reviews, but after the injuries tonight and with the bye coming up, I thought it would be worth sharing how I think the squad will shape itself up after a week off. For those who follow my waffle reviews, they will know that I make this list in order of most likely to least likely changes. And starting off the very beginning, I think it's safe to say that Brady Hough will walk back in after being ruled out with just illness. Secondly, though, I did make a big deal out of Job Shanahan's performance yesterday as a key back, by the way. And if Harry Edwards has sustained even a minor hamstring strain, then Shanahan's going to walk straight in too. To be honest, even if Edwards does come back fine, I think Shanahan will probably have put enough pressure on, say, Sandy Brock this weekend to come in. And number 3, I really hope that Clay Hall can push himself into the field from the first bounce, so off the sub. But other than that, we do have Archer Reed also available to fill the void left by Allen, just without digging into that deeper part of our list that isn't AFL quality and possibly asking the question of how we spread the field around without going for 3 key tools. But anyway, that pretty much covers it for my review tonight. As always, thank you to everyone for tuning in. And if you're not a subscriber and you're still watching, please consider hitting that subscribe button, as this is still a fairly new channel on YouTube, and every new and existing subscriber makes a really big difference in making this a viable investment of my time. And if you are, then I'll hopefully see you all again after the bye. So until then,